So we land in Israel. The food was fucking banging. Israelis and Palestinians are both equally excited to learn when I'm Lebanese. They fucking love it. So after I met the Intel lady, after learning that I was like a Lebanese Maronite descendant, she got really, really excited and introduced me to this Israeli Maronite. This guy is like really close to the border. The question is, you said we're exposed to Lebanon. This dude here, who used to be a sniper, is a little bit uneasy. The ex-sniper dude starts nudging me and is like, we should go, we should move back down. He said that they could see flashes, like a lens makes when it's reflecting light. And then I find out that the reason he said 2 or 3 minutes is because 3 minutes is the minimum time it takes to find a target and to point a mortar at it. Okay. So I just tell you the whole story. It might take like 2 hours, depending on how much I elaborate. Okay. We land in Israel at about midnight. Obviously, as I expected, the guy has a good peep at my passport. They ask us all about what we're doing. We explain. The guy takes my passport away and then sends me over to this little corner, the naughty corner. And then the other guys, they get their passports back and they get the little green ticket that says "Welcome to Israel" and all that shit. I don't have my passport though, so we're all just sitting in this corner, and someone said they could hear them talking about, like, they're talking in Hebrew behind the fucking counter about like this guy. Have a look. So we're all just sat down in the corner, and we're sitting there for like an hour and a half. It's an hour. The place is dead. It's completely empty. So it's not like they're short on manpower, but yeah, we're stuck there for an hour and a half. Then eventually, this dude in like civilian clothing, just like in jeans and a t-shirt, comes and says, "Nassif, that's my name." And I'm like, "Yeah." Okay, he's like, "Okay, come with me. Come with me." I'm like, okay. We're walking up to so I'm just walking in, and he sits me down, and he's like, "Okay, listen, I'm just gonna ask you a few questions. Be honest with me, okay?" Okay. Yeah. It's like, fuck. It sounds very like, Jesus Christ. So, but then he just asked me what I'm doing. He's like, and then as soon as I mentioned the people we were interviewing, he suddenly just gets like really curious and like very interested, because apparently, it turns out he's a Benny Morris fan. So we just start chatting a little bit, and he's just asking about all the details of the trip. He looks through my YouTube, he looks through my Twitter. He asked me why I'm so interested in the conflict. And obviously and I realized that when he was asking, is like, after kind of being a bit more disarming and a bit more friendly. The reason they asked that, I don't know this, but I'm almost 100% sure. I think they ask you that because they want to know why a Westerner cares. Or why a Westerner with an Arab name cares. Because usually a Westerner with an Arab name cares because they are radicalized by left-wingers and they want to destroy Israel, right? Like, that's very often the case. Yeah, but otherwise, he just asked, and I gave a little opinion about like my journey from being like Lebanese family and like the wars and the going from left to center or left to center left, like all this kind of shit. And it was interesting because he was actually really nice though. The interview lasted like half an hour, and I almost got the feeling that there was a moment where it felt like he was explaining himself to me more than I was explaining myself to him. He was trying to explain shit like about like how Israel's under threat and we've got loads of enemies and all this shit. Like, okay, you can do your job and all that. I don't mind. So yeah, he just does all that, and then he sends me away. And I'm like, wait, where's my passport though? And he's like, hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm like, oh fuck. So I still think I'm like fucking destroyed here. And then we go and sit down, and then we sit for another like 10, 20 minutes. Well done for every fucking retard in chat who thinks they can spell my name from listening to it. Okay. Yeah, and then he just gives me the fucking, then he just comes out, gives my passport and says, hey, welcome. That's it. Yeah. So I don't know what the wait was for. He asked about my dad's name, my fucking grandfather's name, and all this shit. I guess he maybe wanted to know if there was any like intel on their past, like in the wars, because they were in the country in Lebanon during the war. But no, I guess I was cleared. Seems like the phalangist accusations have once again been defeated by Israeli intel. Or maybe they actually found out that there was phalangism and they were like, actually, based. But I don't know. So yeah, they did the check. It was all good. And then we get in. And then, yeah, we get to our hotel. We learn about Shabbat elevators. Fuck me. So on Shabbat, I don't know exactly what the rule is, but you can't use an elevator on Shabbat. So what they have is this elevator that just goes automatically to every floor and stops and opens. So that you're not breaking Shabbat by pressing the buttons. So I guess it's like interacting with technology or some shit. I don't know. Yeah, it just goes to every floor. And yeah, you can't use electricity. Yeah. So, and we're talking about it being like a loophole, but then apparently practicing Jews get very upset when you call it a loophole, because it's not a loophole. They're actually, they're following the rules. They're just doing what the rules say. Like, so that's silly. Okay. So it's a good introduction to the country. Okay. Our first interview that we do is with a guy called Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who I read about just in the morning before going to the interview. I just did a pretty quick scan of him. Again, he doesn't do that much English-speaking media that I know, so going through him didn't take that long. Basically, this is the guy who came up with the Emirate solution. The idea that, like, Palestinians don't need a state. That's not what they want. Arabs don't need states. They don't need republics, socialist countries or anything. They don't need that. They don't like it. They collapse when they do that, when they do republics. So what you do instead is you acknowledge their cultural differences and realize that these are people who operate in a tribal clan-based way. This is what he says. He said that they're more loyal to the clan than they are to the state. That's why countries like Iraq that tried to bring in a whole bunch of various ethnic and clan groups and bring them under one secular nation state, it's a failure. Syria, same thing. The successful states, however, are, in the Gulf, Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar, Emirates, Oman. And the reason that these states survive, he says, is that they came under like a single clan, a single leader. The other ones were either undermined or purged. And then you have this one sort of like majestic ruler, right? I think he also mentions that like one of the trends is that monarchies in the Arab world do a lot better than secular republics or secular states, and definitely better than socialist ones. So that's his idea. And it's funny because he's basically saying that there's like, this is what is best for the Arabs, right? Because this is how they like to live. Like the clans in Jenin don't really want that much to do with the clans in Nablus. He says that like even marrying between clans, like someone from Nablus wouldn't really marry someone from Ramallah and go there from different clans. But actually that's not true. They do that and it's fairly normal, but we learned that later on. So he does this kind of thing and he talks about how he's like one of the very few Israeli like speakers on the peace process who speaks Arabic as well. A lot of them don't. So he gives us this little spiel, and it's very coincidental that what he thinks is best for the Arabs is also what happens to be best for the most expansionist, messianic, Zionist like political camp as well. So that's interesting. But we have like what seems to be like a 1.5 hour conversation, and as much of a weird Orientalist he is, he's fairly interesting. So we have this conversation. But I remember when I was researching him, I learned about his connections to a particular organization that was called Stop the Islamization of Nations. And I know these guys because they're the two founders of this organization that he was in like 15 years ago, were both cited, one of them at length, in the manifesto of Anders Breivik. They're very, very extreme anti-Muslim immigration in Europe, like great replacement theory. We're being invaded. It's a 1500-year war. The immigration jihad and all this shit. So I just asked him about the organization because I was like, he doesn't seem to be quite like them based on what I'm hearing from him. But I asked him anyway. And suddenly we end up in this like half an hour to 45-minute debate about the Great Replacement in Europe, which he fully believes. Like he believes in it being immigration jihad. He believes that like he's like rattling me off like names of neighborhoods in Europe that are like no-go zones. And he stumbles across a couple in London that I've walked through like a million times. He's like, oh, this town in Sweden or this town in Paris or like in Marseille. You can't walk there. And they're like, I don't know, I've never been there. And he's like, what about Whitechapel, like East London. Can you walk through East London? I'm like, yeah, I've walked through Whitechapel like a million times. I know like tiny 5-foot women who live in Whitechapel, and they walk around there at night all the time, and it's fine. I was like, Luton? I'm like, okay, well, I've walked through Luton, like coming from the airport. It's like, but only the airport. He's like, yeah, just. So I started to notice that there's something a bit off with this guy. And then before I know it, he's talking about how, like, if we're not careful in Europe, because of the birth rates, we're going to have uh, museums for blonde children. So we got that moment. We got that clipped for him. So that's the first guy we meet. That's the first guy we meet. Okay, moving on. I I was there's an extra part of that story, but I don't want to tell you guys. I'll let someone else. I'll let Steven tell you about it if he wants to. Um, so that was very surprising. That's where the Emirates solution comes from. But he does to his credit, he brings a few arguments that now that I know they're not as sound as they were at the time to me. He said a few things that I thought were like maybe a little bit convincing, like how true is it that like that people are more loyal to that people in like Arab culture are more loyal to like sort of local level groups or like clans or tribe, because I know that it is a thing for like in the Middle East to have like really, really big families, like big tribes or clans, right? And they do have a lot of control at a local level. And it did make me wonder, like, this kind of clashes with my understanding, which is that Arafat, like a secular nationalist leader who wasn't even born in Palestine, he was born in Egypt, and barely lived there for most of his life. How do they rally around this guy with like 95% of the vote? If they're a clan-based culture, why weren't there like a massive split of different parties? He kind of believes that this is like a kind of like a myth, like this kind of nationalism is imposed almost, or it's like it's not really real. It's just something that they rally around. Really, like Palestinian nationalism is just like it's just another word for opposition to Israel, right? So it's not really like an authentic national unity. So that's kind of his position, but looking into it later, I found out that that's not really a good argument because before Oslo, Israel did have negotiations with local tribe leaders, like local organization leaders, and it didn't really work. Like, yeah, it's people went for Arafat instead, even though there was that other option. So yeah, I don't know, but funny guy, very funny guy, and also very popular in the Israeli right. The Israeli right, this Emirates solution, they love it. They love it. Because again, it's like it doesn't sound like apartheid or second class citizens or Bantustan, right? It sounds like, no, this is what they want, you know, they're medieval and shit. Silly. I hope you have the interview. Yeah, of course we do, yeah. I don't have it on me, but we have it, yeah. So that's the Emirates solution. That's the guy who is behind it. It's a bit wacky, who knows? Day 2, I guess. Day 2, we end up meeting Yaya Galan, who has just recently become the leader of the Labour Party in Israel. Also, so quite left wing. Some people who don't even like him. People think he's like going to be the next Yitzhak Rabin. Again, he's not going to get the same number of votes, but yeah, he's the leader of the Israeli Labour Party. The Labour Party in Israel is not quite what it used to be. They're not very popular. They don't get that much votes. But whether him having the prospect of him having an influential role in the next government because of the coalition system is possible. But yeah, another thing that you learn about Israeli left is that they all have to be big military figures. They have to be. You can't, right wingers don't have to be, but they have to be. So this guy is not only so left compared to the Israeli public that they see him as a traitor, but he's also like a national hero because on October 7th, he got into an old military uniform and drove to the Nova site and rescued people. He just started picking people up and doing like back and forth road trips to rescue like I don't remember how many people it was, but it was quite a few. Not only that, but he also when he was in the military in in the 2010s when Bashar al-Assad was bombing his own people. He was making trips to the border, to the Syrian border, to rescue civilians and take them to Israeli hospitals. He was doing that as well. So this guy's got like a very, very yeah, he's got a very kind of like heroic history to him. And that is the only reason. It's the only reason that like the Israeli public would ever tolerate him in leading a party, because if you're Israeli labor, you have to have this behind you. You have to have military credentials and like heroic stories behind you, because otherwise they're just not going to trust you. They will just think that you're going to sign a deal that would compromise security. That's it. What do you think about Vaush burning the bridge over the Israel trip? What, with me? I didn't even know that was a thing. Why would he burn the bridge over the Israel trip? Wow. Then we meet Alon Levy, the spokesperson who's famous for the eyebrow clip. Alon Levy, when he was the former Israeli spokesperson who got fired because he says it's because Netanyahu's wife hates him. Might be the case, because I don't think it's because he's a bad spokesperson. He's actually really, really good at what he does. Classic Oxbridge debate vibes. But yeah, where's I don't know the clip, but basically he was the Israeli spokesperson. He was famous for this clip on CNN because she asked him, where is it? Hang on. Is it here? Is this it? This is him talking about it. Oh, this is him talking about it. Where the fuck is the clip? Alon Levy, CNN, eyebrows. The one where he raises his eyebrows, I don't know. Whatever. Basically, some CNN person goes to him and says, "Oh, you're exchanging like one you're getting one Israeli hostage in exchange for 150 Palestinians. Like, does that mean that you value Palestinian life less than Israelis?" That was the question. And he just raises his eyebrows and he's like, we're not the ones making the decision for how many Palestinians are worth the one. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, it was Sky News. Ah. Yeah, it was such a stupid question, but yeah, we met him and our interview with him happened in the van. It happened in the back of a van when we're just getting driven up to the north to go to another meeting. So we're talking to him and yeah, we just got into like stupid arguments about Israeli propaganda and why it's not very good and why about Israel, like the failures of Israel in the last 20 years and like how they try to, and how their approach of like status quo and kicking the Palestinian can down the road isn't like a very good idea. But yeah, we just have a little like sort of casual discussion in the van. It's at that moment when I realize I need to get better at public speaking, because he is that guy, I mean, to be fair to him, he was just born in front of a camera. Like he rolled out of the fucking womb, put on a suit and started telling people what's what in the first intifada or whatever. Yeah, that guy. But I definitely learned a lot about like public speaking from him. He spoke over Destiny a lot in that podcast. Yeah, but like because he's like, well, he didn't do that to us. He didn't speak over us as much, but he did like he was very good at steering the conversation in directions that he wants to. And I think I made it a little bit awkward, because I think at one point I was like, I've noticed like for the third time now that when we bring up Israeli failures, you'll kind of give it a nod for like 2 seconds and then just go back to talking about the war on 7 fronts or whatever that you want to talk about. And I just asked him like, is that intentional? And yeah, I think I made things a little bit awkward by doing that, but yeah, no, he was all right. He was a friendly guy. And then we go up to the way up north. We meet Nas Daily, of all people. You know Nas Daily, the big the guy with like 15 million subscribers, who's like who does all the shorts. He's a really interesting guy as well. He's very different to how he is on YouTube. The Palestinian Israeli guy. I think he grew up in Nazareth. I also at this little event that we were at, there were a bunch of Israelis, and like Alon Levy was there as well, and they're sitting around this table. This was all on camera as well. They were sitting around this table, and they were talking about what people can do in Israel to improve their impression making on the world stage, because they're all just like the rest of the world hates us, like we're losing on the fucking information war to all these people in like colleges and campuses and like the youths on social media and shit like that. Like how do we like turn that around? And it was like really funny because I think it was Stephen who pointed out that we're really just watching a conversation of Israel full of mostly Israeli Jews complaining about how they have no influence on international media. I like that was just a really funny conversation to me, because the way people talk about Jews in the media, and just seeing a group of like Jewish people around the table, some of them actually high profile and influential, just being like, I just can't understand this international media. We just can't seem to get a hold of it. It's like, yeah, that's the truth of it. So I'm trying to think. I don't want to just go through day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. One of the things I learned was that I was really surprised by how eager everyone was to talk. Everyone apart from Arab Israelis. Arab Israelis don't want to talk. Like 9 out of 10 of them just don't want to go on camera. They don't want to have their voice perceived in a microphone. They're worried about Ben Gavir's police, or depending on who you ask, apparently they're also afraid of their own people coming down on them for being too soft. I don't know, fucking. I think it's more the former, based on what I've seen. Yeah, they are really like, they're in a difficult situation right now because there's so much pressure on them to convince the Israelis that they live around that they're not like them. I don't know, that they're not like the people in Gaza or like Hamas and all that shit. So, yeah, difficult. But other than that, everyone was really, really keen to talk. People in the West Bank were really keen to talk. As soon as we came into the West Bank, like into one of the checkpoints for a fairly busy Palestinian town in Area C, like the first thing that we see is like some guy he's like selling fruit and vegetables on the road, being like screaming like, come film, get your camera, put it here, look at this, show them, show the world, show the oppression, show the like difficulties that we have to deal with. I was like, fuck, damn, these guys were really like up for it. And people in the shops wanted to talk. People who were just like randoms in the street were up for talking. And same with Israelis as well. Like whether it was settlers or left wingers, or like they were all just like really, really keen to talk. And I also noticed that like everyone felt like, you could tell that everyone felt like they had to do like international spokesperson work. Like they had to sell something to the rest of the world. Did you cry when you had to leave the camel behind? Like, listen, the camel was... I love this picture. This is just such a... Look at his face. There's a little face. Anyway. Did you interview any hardcore settlers? Yeah. Yeah. We met like a settler spokesperson from Hebron. What's his name? Yishai Flesher. We met him. He's pretty hard. He's pretty hardcore. Yeah. We met like a settler family, American settler family, or like American, they had American accents. Again, there's a little bit of diversity of opinion among settlers, but yeah, they're kind of what I expected. They're quite out there. They have strong opinions. God. Got to see a little bit the difference between Mizrahi and Jews in Tel Aviv Israelis, like the more left-wing ones in Tel Aviv compared to the more right-wing ones down in Sderot. We got to see a bit of that. The other thing that I was kind of surprised by a little bit, or I don't know, it's not really surprised. It's like, it's things that you know, but you don't really feel it in the same way as when you've actually just like been exposed to it properly. So I knew that Israelis and Palestinians, whether or not they're moderates or left-wingers or whatever, they really don't like to cede any ground for their national cause because the conflict's not over, right? So one of the questions I would ask people constantly is I would go around and be like, in the last 100 years, what was the worst thing that the other side has done to you. Like if I'm talking to a Palestinian, I would be like, what was the worst thing that Israelis ever did to Palestinians? And then I would ask the opposite, what's the worst thing that your side's ever done to them? And always when I asked, if people weren't prepared for that question, if I asked like an Israeli, even like a very left-wing Israeli, what's the worst thing that Israelis have ever done to Palestinians, they froze. They didn't know what to say. That was like a really strange thing. And then there was one person I was talking to, she was a volunteer for the agricultural industry because they'd been fucked during the war. And I think one of the reasons that she gave me, which I think probably makes sense, is that it's not just because the conflict's not over and you feel like you've got too much at stake. It was because apparently there's this feeling now that because the Jewish community is really small in the world, that as soon as a camera is put in front of any of them, they all kind of feel like they need to be a spokesperson, that they need that, like the fucking well-being of the state is on their shoulders for that like 5 or 10 minutes that you're talking to them. And that was definitely something that I never heard it worded in that way to me before, but it made a lot more sense. Yeah. Like a giant cabal. Yeah, almost like a giant cabal, believe it or not. Yeah. But yeah, that was a kind of interesting takeaway. The fact that like you could have someone who's learned Israeli-Palestinian history for the like all the way from 48 until now, and they know a few key events, but or even if I just bring something up. So if I'm talking to someone, I was talking to an intel lady on the Lebanese border who was a really interesting person, like near the Lebanese border. I was talking to her, and I was talking about just like giving, because I tend to give a bit of background for questions, just because. That's just how I like to do things. And I mentioned like the bloody past between Israel and Lebanon, and then I go through like the PLO attacks, then I go through the war, then I go through like Sabra Shatila. And as soon as I mentioned Sabra Shatila, she's like, no, wait. Just so you know, that was not Israelis who did that. That was Christians. Israelis did not do that. And I'm like, yeah, but they, they shot at the flares and they surrounded the camps, and Sharon like was allowed them to go in, right? But yeah, it's just like there was this very reflexive, like anytime you bring up anything controversial that's related to Israel, it's always like, it's always like, well, that one wasn't as bad as people made it out to be, or that one, there's a whole bunch, well, it's bad, but there's a whole bunch of context around that one, and that one actually was like the other side. Yeah, that just goes on so much with every kind of thing that you bring up. And again, you can tell it's just because people like they know that the international media is watching them, and they feel like they're also another thing I noticed as well, because one of the people actually said this to us like openly, was that they were suspicious about the answers that they were giving being chopped up or being used to undermine Israel, or to be like to sell like pro-Palestinian propaganda and shit like that. Like they were very honest about that. Yeah, I don't know, that was interesting. And for Palestinians in the West Bank, they are a little bit more open about their aspirations, I noticed, but I think in the same way, depending on how you ask a question, you might get the complete opposite answers. Like you might be able to it's possible to get someone in the West Bank to ask them if they believe in revenge, right? Or if they believe in like killing civilians or whatever, or violent resistance, and a lot of them will just be like, no, we're a religion of peace. Like revenge doesn't help anyone, doesn't bring anyone back, blah blah blah. But then you'll ask like if they support October 7th, or you'll name like some figures like Hamas or like the Intifada and all that, and then they'll say, oh yeah, that was like justified, right? So it depends on how you ask each question. You might get like very contradictory answers. And that for Israelis and Palestinians, you need to ask questions in very different ways to actually get close to what you think to what they actually think. Same with like right-wing Israelis. To get answers from them, it's like you have to do a little bit of finessing to figure out what they're saying. You ask in English. Yeah, we ask in English, and you have to think about translations, but I don't think it's that. I don't think it's translation. It's not just that. It's the way that you ask a question. I feel like the way it's posed to them matters a lot. I don't know though. I was also just a little bit pleasantly surprised by how nice everyone was. One thing I've learned about Palestinians in the West Bank because of their education system, probably, is that, well, the education system and their culture is that they're so, they're very friendly, they're very, very hospitable, they're very like, I don't know, just like decent people, but politically they're just kind of insane. That's another thing I've noticed. Like, I feel like based on the media that they watch, or like or just the, not even the media they watch or the information they get, but it's also just the general the general what's the general default, like, because the different cultures will have like kind of like default opinions on things, and that some people will just say things because the people around them believe it, right? So like for Scottish independence, like it very quickly became a thing that if you were a youth in Scotland, you used to be like normal to be like anti independence, but then as the campaign started, if you were a young person, you would just say you were pro independence, and a lot of people just didn't even know why. It was just like that was just the right thing to say. And I think it's the same with Palestinians in the West Bank. Is like there's a lot of things they say that maybe contradict something that they said like 5 minutes ago, but it's just because there are certain things that you don't disagree with, that you can't disagree with it. Yeah. Or you just don't think about it that much. Constellation of beliefs. It's kind of like that. Yeah. People do tend to like ideology. That's what ideology is, like a constellation of beliefs. Yeah. This picture made people really fucking angry. I don't know. I just thought like we had a couple of like pretty humanizing photos, like all the fucking school kids who had to come out of a fucking checkpoint to come and see us. Like, because they come out of this checkpoint after school, and then they noticed that we were filming, so they just all started running towards us and letting us know what's what and like high-fiving us and shit. So that was cute. And then this was a volunteer, someone who was volunteering at the Gazan border to do like mostly to do with helping the agricultural workers, because the agricultural industry is like really fucked. So managed to get an interview with her. She was actually quite interesting because she lived in northern Lebanon when she was a kid. No, northern Israel. So when she was a kid, she was getting bombed by Hezbollah to the point that they had to get evacuated. And I'm like, funny story. Tell you about what happened to my grandmother in that war. Like same thing in the other, yeah. But yeah. So this was a good conversation. I think it needs to get edited a lot because she had to stop to like cry a few times, but otherwise, yeah. Some kids from one of the refugee camps. This guy was fucking brilliant. This guy was the most hostile guy of the whole journey. This guy who just decided to call Stephen every fucking slur under in Hebrew and Arabic. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Hebrew speakers use Arabic insults. I didn't know that. I know they'll say like yalla and other shit like that, but yeah, I didn't know that. He was asking for help. Yeah, apparently, yeah. Because he was sitting on the, well, we were filming because he was sitting on the road. And he was like shouting at this girl next to him. So I don't know if they were homeless, but yeah, he was shouting at this girl next to him and just being like fucking a bit much. So then he comes up to us and then yeah, this guy was something else. With the Friends t-shirt as well. Yeah. He either wanted help or he wanted to move the car. And we were at a light though. I don't know. He was, but yeah, I know he was mad at being filmed. Yeah. And we couldn't communicate. He wanted money. Maybe. Like they were just sitting on the side of a very busy road. It was outside of Tel Aviv. I think it was on the way into Tel Aviv. But yeah, it was a big misunderstanding, okay? Fuck. I don't know what other stories. Getting stopped by the IDF when we were with Corey going into Nablus. Day one, the IDF stopped us from going into Nablus. That was a funny story. They stopped us twice. We got to learn the difference between settler IDF soldiers and normal ones. The settler ones are a lot more fucking mental than the normal ones. we parked at a settlement called Yitzhar, like a really extreme right-wing settlement that's known for, when you hear stories about settlers running down to Palestinian towns and burning the fields, or that's what people from Yitzhar do. That's like their kind of thing. And they're strategically placed on top of a hill so that the Palestinian town is at the bottom of the hill. Then on the other side, the other hill on the opposite side, there's another settlement overlooking. So they're just like on both ends flanking the Palestinian town. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. So we were parking there. Actually, Yitzhar was near Hawara. It's near Hawara where those riots happened in last year or 22, right? But yeah, when we were around here, like trying to park ourselves to go towards to get picked up to go to Nablus, this fucking like this really weird like hillbilly looking settler in a fucking buggy comes down in flip flops with an M16 or with a whatever automatic machine gun, yeah, comes down and just starts shouting at us and takes our passports and is like really non-communicative and being really, really fucking difficult with us. And Corey didn't want to speak Hebrew to him because, you're not supposed to, like, if you're an Israeli going towards Area A, they'll obviously, like, you can't do that. So we tried not to. So the guy's talking on the phone to call up his guys to come and talk to us, like the reinforcements, I guess. And we could tell through Corey translating that he was like, he wasn't worried about us being terrorists or anything like that. What he was worried about was that we were left-wing activists who had come to undermine Israel. That's what this settler guy was worried about. He was calling the IDF, his superiors, to tell him that he was worried about left-wing activists coming to the West Bank to shit on Israel. The fuck? And then these other guys come in, and then like 4 other guys come in a fucking armored vehicle, and they're more normal. They're just like in normal shoes and sunglasses and like normal looking. And then they were really friendly. They gave us like water and juice and shit like that. And they were immediately with the left wing activist thing. They were just like, I don't care. Like, that's not why we're here. Like, we're here to tell you that like, we're worried about your safety. We make sure you guys understand all the risks. We need to make sure that, that you have a contact in case anything happens. So the guy, like, he gives us his phone number as well. He gives us his fucking WhatsApp number to call him in case we get into trouble in Nablus. And so he's really insistent. He tells us all the risks. He tells us like some of the do's and don'ts when we're there, gives us his fucking number, gives us the big bottle of water to keep for ourselves. And they just leave us off. But then we only get blocked right at the end because the fucking hillbilly guy wouldn't let Corey park in his community. He wouldn't let him park across the gate. And you can't park on like, say this is Yitzhar and we're up the hill parking here. You can park here and your car will be safe, but you can't park here because your car might get stolen. That's like you could park here, but not here. Because if you're in a road that is used by both Israelis and Palestinians, you'll just get fucked. And the taxi driver didn't want to come up here because like he was worried about getting fucking fucked up by these guys. So with a Palestinian license plate. So yeah. Yitzhar. That's what I said. Yitzhar. Yitzhar. Okay. So that was a fucking mess. But what, at like 20, 30-minute drive, we end up in Kfar Qasim, and it's like completely chill. That's another thing I realized as well. I realized everything's really, really close together, but the lifestyles and just like the conditions that people live under is also just like so far away. If you go to like a Palestinian town around here, anything around here in Area C, it's a fucking mess. It's like the Wild West because Area C is fully Israeli controlled, civil and security. So if you're in a Palestinian place here, the question is, well, what do you do for security or civil administration? Well, the answer is nothing. The IDF don't police these towns, and these towns don't have the Palestinian Authority. They don't have their local police, so it's like the Wild West. You just depend on your family to stay safe, right? Or your connections, like who you know. We also, when we're driving through this area, we notice a lot of these Palestinian towns have smoke rising from them, like big plumes of smoke. And we asked, like, is this because there's like violence? Is there people fighting and all that? And Corey's just like, no, it's because they're burning trash. like in Area C, especially in the Palestinian towns, they burn their trash because no one else, like there's no bin person who's going to come and collect it. And then, but you just get right over the green line in Kfar Qasim, and it's suddenly just like very quiet. They've got infrastructure. They've got like, there's not really any, people aren't being threatening and all that. Like the roads are similar. They're still like very chaotic drivers, but it's just so mad that you can have like the same ethnic group, the same national group almost, like, but different citizenship and just over this line. And suddenly everything changes. Yeah. It's like really fucked up. And also they think completely different ways as well. The people we met in Kfar Qasim were like, listen, like I'm an Arab, but I'm also an Israeli. They'll say like, we want Jewish people to come to our shops, and we have like the little Jewish candle at our door to let people know that we don't mean any harm. Like, we want peace to be between us, and we want people to shop here. And we've lost a lot of Jewish customers because of October 7th. Yeah, mezuzah, yeah. So it was just, but then you come here and yeah, the attitude's very different. Like here in these areas, if you walk around with a Star of David, like you might die or you might get beaten up. So, ooh, yeah. Did anything on this trip significantly shift your perspective / views on things that you thought were solid understandings? Nah, not really. I got to learn new things. Like I think I have a slightly different opinion on the napkin accord now. I think Olmert was actually. I think that peace effort from 2008 from Olmert was actually quite good faith, and I think it would have been a good deal. I think the problem with it was that the Israeli right, I think it was the Israeli right, had criminal indictments against him, and he just had no credibility to push forward a process. And Abbas, who I think was reluctant anyway, had a very good excuse to just kind of snub the process. I also learned that like people say that Abbas just like threw out a peace deal. He was just a piece of shit who just ditched a peace deal, even when Olmert gave him like quote unquote everything. But Olmert himself disagrees with that. Olmert is actually quite sanguine about the whole relation between him and Abbas now. He still thinks Abbas is like a good faith actor for peace, just that, it was the wrong time. And he thinks Abbas made the wrong decision, but ultimately, like, he would have made the right decision in different circumstances. I don't know. So that was, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, that Olmert felt that way. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm a lot less like, I think that thing about both sides, when people use both sides as a kind of pejorative or like they sneer at that like phrase, I think it's just because they don't know what they're talking about. Even in the case of the war, although like obviously Israel is able to kill a lot more people in Gaza than Gazans are able to kill Israelis, I still don't think it's as one-sided as people make it out to be. In the 6-Day War, Israel won in 6 days. They defeated 3 conventional Soviet-backed armies in 3 days and captured all their territory, or a lot of their territory. So that was Israel in the 60s. Look at them now, though. Look, like against Hamas, it's taking them like 8 or 9 months, and Hamas, because of the way that they fight, because of the fact that they don't depend on battalions and like solid military infrastructure, because they don't depend on like they're not put off by the fact that lots of their civilians are dying. They just keep going, and that's actually harder, even though militarily it looks more one-sided, right? Because in Israel, Egypt, it was tanks versus tanks, planes versus planes. But now, when it's like F-35s against guys with Kalashnikovs and grenades in a tunnel, it should be more in Israel's favor, but it's actually not. It's actually like a really, really difficult it's a really difficult thing to circumstance to fight in. And the same with Hezbollah in the north. Because in 2006, Hezbollah were able to kill more Israeli soldiers in exchange for their own than any other Arab army since 1948. I think in the 2006 war, Israel killed something between like 400 and 800 Hezbollah fighters, but lost over 120. Like that ratio is not something that any Arab forces had since maybe like the Arab Legion. So yeah, I think that's something that people don't really acknowledge, is that although Israel does have like the superior technology and the whatever else, like, and this, more secure border and all that shit. They also are in a situation where you've got Hamas, who are still somehow able to fire rockets from the south. You've got low scale attacks coming from the West Bank, or like violence within the West Bank. You've got fucking Syria, which has Hezbollah present there as well, and other like smaller groups. You've got the Houthis in Yemen. You've got Hezbollah up in the north, who have forced a whole bunch of Israeli towns in the north of Israel to evacuate. And then you've got obviously Iran. Like, that is a very difficult situation to be in militarily. And it is actually a both sides thing in terms of finding a decisive winner to that. And I think people don't really appreciate that. Like, people don't really understand that kind of difference. The fact that you can, that a country that was able to defeat 3 conventional militaries in 6 days is now struggling to defeat like scattered non-state actors and proxies on like every part of their border. Yeah, it's a very new kind of challenge. I don't really buy when people I think Alon Levy tries to say we're at war on 7 fronts. I don't really know if you'd say it like that way, because that's kind of like saying the war against 5 armies in 48, even though one army did basically nothing, like the Lebanese army, right? It's a stretch to say it like that, but it does. I think the answer is actually somewhere in the middle. Because when you've got war on 7 fronts on one side, but on the other side, you've got people saying things like it's just like a completely asymmetrical, one-sided, oppressive, massive, like first world military versus people with like Kalashnikovs and grenades. That's not accurate either. Yeah. You don't know how Israel is able to get away with occupying Area C, but not providing services for the Palestinians living there. Can you elaborate on that? Well, why they get away with it? The same reason they get away with settlements and all the other shit, right? Yeah. I was also fairly surprised to see that, like, yeah, I don't know. As far as the situation in the north goes, the situation in the north is fucked. I don't think it's a question of if there's going to be a war with Hezbollah anymore. I think it's when, like a full scale war. What's the steelman argument that they don't provide those services? Oh, because it's dangerous. That's what their steelman would be. Their steelman is that if you send rubbish collectors into Palestinian towns in Area C, you'll get fucked up. That's probably the steelman. I don't know if it's true, but would Israel invade and occupy Lebanon? I don't know, but the problem is that actually, I'm not even sure how much I'm allowed to say because okay, no, I know what I'm allowed to say. Hezbollah have increased their attacks on northern Israel since the beginning of October 7th. Like, and it's a kind of attack that Israel is not really fully equipped to deal with. Those unmanned aerial vehicles, like the suicide drones, Israel doesn't really have a great way to deal with that, which is why they've had to evacuate so many places in the north. It's too dangerous. And even army people and intel people who are going to gather information from the northern border, they don't want to go anymore. Because it's such a state. And the problem is that Israel have been making threats against Hezbollah since October 8th. They've been saying, if you fuck with us, we will fuck you harder, right? That's the whole Israeli thing. And the problem is that you can make so many threats before they stop becoming credible threats, which is what happened in 2000 as well. When Ehud Barak left southern Lebanon, in 2000, he said that if Hezbollah does anything to us, we will come down on them like a ton of bricks. We'll bomb them to the Stone Age or whatever, right? That was the threat. And then Ariel Sharon comes in 2004, and he says the same thing. But through that whole time, 2000 2006, Hezbollah fired like 12,000 rockets into Israel. And this is pre-Iron Dome, right? These are when people are just having to run into, and places in the north are not well equipped at this time with bomb shelters or precautions or anything like that, or like siren systems. So people are just getting fucked up by that, and people are having to evacuate their towns. So by the time you get to 2006, and Hezbollah launches that raid where they kill 8 people and kidnap 2 soldiers, then Ehud Barak is like, well, we've had 2 prime ministers make these threats. It hasn't caused Hezbollah to back off, so they had to go in for an invasion. That's how they felt. And then Nasrallah, for all their, for all their victories on their end and the propaganda war and everything else, Nasrallah said, Olmert, sorry, Ehud Olmert, for all of the ways that Hezbollah were able to claim victory in that war, even Nasrallah said that if he knew that Israel would react in that way, he wouldn't have done it. He wouldn't have launched that raid. So the problem now is that Israel have been making threats for 8 months, but they're not really credible threats because the IDF's not doing anything, right? They're launching counterstrikes and they're f***ing up the south, but they're not really like responding in the way that is a deterrent, right? They've increased capabilities and combat experience since 2006 in Syria. Yeah, they're insanely experienced. They have a much easier time smuggling weapons in through Syria and through Iran and all that shit. They're very well fortified and well positioned. You know that thing after the 2006 war when Iran funded Hezbollah to rebuild all the damaged infrastructure, and then Hezbollah gets to claim that we're like the big national rebuilders, like we're the saviors of Lebanon. We fought the invaders and now we're going to rebuild after the invaders have left. Like that, they did rebuild, but that's not all they did. They also built completely new areas or extended areas to push them closer to the border. So when I was taken to the top of this hill, like 2 miles away from the border or 2.5 miles away from the border, you could see Bint Jbeil in the background, but you could also closer see extensions or new parts that were built from scratch in 2006, like right on the edge of the hill, giving them a more strategic position. And they had been doing that since 2006 and pushing themselves closer to the border and fortifying positions and gathering arsenal and all that shit. But also, what the intel lady told me was that in COVID, they paused so that they could take care of the population and get the people vaccinated and, do lockdown and all that shit. But then from what we were seeing before October 7th was from about 2020. From about 2020 to 2022, 23, Hezbollah were constantly spotted setting up new positions, building new tunnels, and moving new installations towards the border. Like that warning was there for a long time. Now, whether or not they knew about Hamas's plan, we'll never know. But they were doing, they had their own motivations because Hezbollah's whole thing has been death to Israel. We want to take over Jerusalem. We want to connect a Muslim Lebanon with a Muslim Palestine. So yeah, one of the intel ladies actually gave me a pen drive of stuff that she had seen from 2020 to 2023. And she's like, this is the shit that she showed me. She took this photograph, the lady that I met near the border. And there are just these guys like setting up shop, looking back at her with their little binoculars and shit. This is mental. A lot of these are newly built as well. These little watchtowers and shit. Oh yeah, them building this on top of this area. Shalom. Shabbat shalom. You served there. They one time went up to the border and started cursing at us. Why aren't you allowed to say stuff? Because I don't think I should be telling people in public what the IDF are been ordered to do at the north right now. No, that's kind of stupid. But yeah, this lady was really interesting. She was quite right. She was clearly quite right-leaning, or I think. But it's also interesting that the people who are talking about the threat and how we need to vanquish this evil and shit like that from the northern border so that people can return to their homes and all this shit. Even the people who talk like that, the intel lady, and you'll notice this from the interview as well, I was asking her about the prospect of war with southern Lebanon, with Hezbollah. And she was really reluctant to answer in a clear way, but she actually told me that the reason she said she was really reluctant is because that because the way that she sees it is that this is basically something that is inevitable. Like this is something that is almost definitely will need to happen, but that she also just doesn't like really doesn't want it to happen, right? Because she knows, I guess, like the consequences and what they'll be for civilians in Lebanon, what it'll be for civilians in Israel. And like it's weird that even the people who drum up the threat and say that like this is like a really serious thing, like it's not if, it's when, even them, like they don't really like, they really hate the idea of going to war. Like, and also this the intel group that these people were from were quite interesting as well, because they were telling me like a lot of like sociological stuff about Hezbollah as well, about how if you ever hear Israelis talking about the more, what would you call it, sanitized thing that Israelis will say is they'll say we need to push Hezbollah over the Litany. You ever heard that? The Litani River. And what I was told is that is basically not the right way to think about it. You can't push, like you can't meaningfully push Hezbollah over the Litani, because Hezbollah are not just a military. They're the civilian government of people in the South. They're the reason that people in the South get their welfare and their health care and their social benefits, and that's where their taxes go and shit like that. So you're not pushing the entire civilian infrastructure and civilian government over the border. What's really needed, and it's also because of the range of Hezbollah's rockets, pushing them over the Litani doesn't actually fix it. What she said was it's like the language is not pushing them over, it's disarming. But the problem is when you say disarming actually gives you a much clearer understanding of what would have to happen, right? So when they say disarming, they mean it's a full-on military campaign against these Shiite areas in the South. So yeah, it was very candid. Also quite worrying. I don't know. There were sirens that went off in the town next to us when I was up north as well. Like you can hear when you're standing on the hill looking over at the Lebanon border, there were booms just like all the time. And they weren't even that close to us. They were like 10 kilometers away, the person told me. But because of you're in the Upper Galilee, right? So you're in a place where there's like a lot of it's all hills, right? Hills and valleys. So the echo of the explosions is so disparate that you can't actually figure out which each explosion is. You hear a sound, you can't actually tell if it's the IDF firing artillery that way or if it's Hezbollah firing a rocket your way. You just don't know. Yeah. The north was on fire for most of the time you guys were here. Yeah, parts of the north were on fire when those fires were spreading, I wasn't there on that day, but when we went up, I could see patches of black along the fields from where the fires have been put out. Yeah. Yeah, I did see that. Explosions from both sides. Both sides! Yeah, the Nas Daily. Well done. Did you talk to any soldiers who fought in Gaza? There was one who didn't want to talk, unfortunately. So no. I spoke to someone off the record who had been a sniper at the Great March of Return. Do you feel like you're more pro-Israel now? No. I feel like I'm more solidly both sides than I was before. Anything interesting you learned from the sniper? Not really. We weren't talking that much about the march itself. I didn't know. I knew that the snipers for live rounds had to get approval from a commander. I didn't know it was approval for every shot. I didn't know that. Like every shot they fired had to be approved by a commander. I didn't know that. I also asked someone if it was possible for the IDF to get intelligence on who they were firing at in the moment, and he said no. So someone else told me the opposite though. Someone said that they actually were able to use like facial recognition and they could use their binoculars to identify an Al-Qassam Brigades fighter and just shoot them. But no, that's not what happened. Like they were shooting people based on what they were doing, not on who they were, not on which organization they were part of. At least based on what I heard. Yeah. So we know that much. Any talks with politicians? Oh yeah. Yeah, we spoke to, Yaya Galan's a politician, right? We spoke to a lot of former political figures. Spoke to Yossi Beilin from the Oslo process. We spoke to Shlomo Ben Ami. We spoke to Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel. Spoke to a Haaretz journalist, Anshel Pfeffer. He was really cool. Pfeffer, not Fleffer. Jesus. Spoke to Yosef Haddad, who I was not too keen on. I'm probably not even going to upload his video because he just rambled at me. Spoke to Isawi Frage, who was really cool. Spoke to Steven spoke to Ahmed Tibi. I didn't because I went up north instead, and thank God, because the north was so much more interesting than what the TB conversations sounded like. I met Mustafa Barghouti and Yishai Flesher. Historians, yeah, I met Benny Morris, Mr. Benny. Shlomo Ben-Ami is kind of a historian as well. What was the best interview? I thought, in terms of filling in blanks that I didn't know about, the lady from the northern border was probably the most interesting for me. Otherwise, in terms of just like the most insightful in general, would either be Balin or Ben-Ami. They were both very, very fascinating dudes. The guy who took us around the West Bank was really interesting too, but he doesn't really, I don't really know what his position is on being put on camera or anything like that. So, yeah. How different is the terrain from Mount Lebanon? Honestly, I don't even remember. But this, oh God, this thing. Jesus Christ. This is the northern border.
Front, and I will.
What's this guy saying?
Front, and I will explain it.
The question is. Oh, so I didn't actually. So the place that we're supposed to be looking at is actually to the left of here, but this here I think is like more northeast. But yeah, around here. Okay, this is not actually the right camera angle. I need to have my proper camera.
Front, and I will.
No, actually, yeah, this is Lebanon here. This. Oh, should I tell you the story? Should I tell you the fucking mad story about? Okay, this is probably the craziest thing that happened to me when I was there. You can't see much of it or any of it on this camera because I had my proper camera and then I had my iPhone. So this is the iPhone video. Okay, so after I met the Intel lady, who was about 10 kilometers away from the border, where we went to this location to look at the border and talk about it to do our interview, I told her that I was half Lebanese. And she gets really, really excited about that. Like everyone in the region, by the way, everyone Israeli, Palestinian, they're all really happy to learn your Lebanese. It's funny. But I told her, and she was like, oh, you know what? I'm Lebanese as well. There's like Israeli woman. I was like, wait, what? And then, yeah, because it turned out that her family had come from Beirut. Her family had come from Beirut, and they fled to Israel after just like being murdered in either a pogrom or some street violence. I can't remember exactly when. I think it was her grandparents who had to flee Lebanon during some particular period. But yeah, so that was a good reverse Uno card there. But after learning that I was like a Lebanese Maronite descendant, she got really, really excited and introduced me to this Israeli Maronite from the north. Because yeah, there are 2,000 or there are like, I can't remember how many, but there are a few thousand Israeli Maronites who live in the north who are descended from Israel. They didn't come from Lebanon. They just lived there the whole time. And this guy is like really close to the border. So and he's really, really extreme. He basically believes that there should have been more like Maronite unity between the Israelis and the Israeli Maronites and the Druze and the Lebanese Maronites to basically fuck off Hezbollah and the PLO and to connect a Christian Lebanon to a Jewish Israel. Like that's his whole thing. He was a mental, right? And he was told that I went to see the border with this lady 10 kilometers away. And he's like, no, Habibi, I show you the border. It's like, okay, fuck. So he's like really insistent on showing me the border. And he takes us to this hill, which he said, we can't even go on this hill for more than 2 or 3 minutes because we would be exposed to Lebanon. I was like, what? Okay. So he takes me up to this hill and we can see, again, in a clearer shot, you would see, I think around like to the left of here, you would see Bint Jbeil. And I think this is actually a Shiite community as well. I think this is one of the ones that was actually constructed after the war, after 2006, so that they could get a more strategic position. So we see these parts of like Lebanon, and with your bare eyes, you can see individual buildings apart because we're like less than 3 miles away. And this is when I'm filming this, when the guy's doing his little speech about Maronites and the war and all that shit.
Explain it.
The question is, You said we're exposed to Lebanon.
Yeah, Lebanon is in front of you. This mountain, all this front is Lebanon.
When you say
Literally.
exposed,
All the barren land is Lebanon. The green is Israel, the barren land, the brown is Lebanon.
So here, I think this here in the background is Bin Jbeil, which is the Israelis call it the terror capital. This was the city where Israel went into, and this was when they realized that the war was not going to go the way they expected, because they were surrounded by booby traps. The Hezbollah had been able to intercept their communications. There were like tunnels with reinforced doors and shit like that. Yeah, they were really, really like, this is where they got massively fucked up by Hezbollah, and just really, really struggled here. So that's Bin Jbeil, and then I think here's one of the newer parts. And the reason this dude here, who used to be a sniper, is a little bit uneasy is because right after this clip, which will be on my other camera, I asked him if they could see us as a kind of joke. Like I said, this is a stupid question. Can they see us? I think I even meant about to say it here. Yeah, well, I asked him if they could see us, and then he's like, yeah, they're looking at you right now. They're saying, who's this guy? Like, is he part of the South Lebanon army? Should we kill him? I was like, okay. And then the guy, the ex-sniper dude, starts nudging me and is like, we should go. We should move back down. So we move back down. And then I realized after getting down, and when we're in the car, that the reason the guy was getting a bit uneasy was because he said that they could see flashes, like little flashes of light from these areas in two places, like a lens makes when it's reflecting light.
So I was also like about to ask, but I thought you'd say something.
Wait, so you both saw flickering from the hill? From just from the hill? From
No, from the after like we stand on the hill. So where is Lebanon? Like the first building of Lebanon, we start to see flickers. Like flickers is someone that look at you. I was a sniper rifle, and I know if I see this in the horizon, it's not a big sign.
לא, יש מוג'ר, עג'ר, משהו כזה. לא רג'ר.
Someone look at you, definitely.
לא רג'ר, לא של ה...
I don't know if it was anti-tank missile or sniper rifle or binoculars.
לא, אני אראה לך מה.
Were they inside the town, or were they closer? Because I guess some of them they moved towards the border, right?
Yeah, it probably was hiding somewhere and just looking at.
There will have been someone over here, or close to the border, with either binoculars or sniper scopes, just checking us out on the hill. And then I find out later on that the reason he said 2 or 3 minutes is because 3 minutes is the minimum time it takes to find a target and to point a mortar at it. So, or like anti-tank or some shit. Because yeah, they don't use anti-tank on tanks generally. So that was mental. And then this crazy Maronite dude gets down and he's like, oh yeah, Hezbollah, they know me. They've written 3 articles about me. They hate me. I don't care. But I'm like, you just took a bunch of wankers up on this hill to stare them down. So now I'm like, okay, so I don't know how it works on the other end, but I do know that if Israeli intel spots people, they will take pictures of them, right? That Israeli intel will do this and they'll take pictures. So how do I know that a Hezbollah guy hasn't taken a picture of me standing on this hill like a retard? And I'm like filed away in some little document. Because I've learned, I know that anti-Hezbollah activists have been arrested in Beirut in the airport by Hezbollah, and they don't always come back. So not good, bro. That was not expected. And Stephen missed all that because he was interviewing some politician. And also, it would be even more interesting to them because I'm looking at them with a camera. I'm holding a camera and looking at them. standing next to a guy who they've written articles about, apparently. Jesus. I don't know. After being in the north, after the sirens, after seeing the damage, and after hearing the booms, I don't really know if I find Hassan Nasrallah that funny anymore. He's actually a really bad dude. Did the camera capture the flashbacks? I don't know, because the camera I was using was given to me by our camera guy. It's like it wasn't like, oh, that's why I'm so annoyed, because the camera guy was with Stephen, and the camera guy with Stephen, they were doing their interview in the Knesset, and for some reason I can't remember why they had to use their iPhone cameras. They weren't allowed to take the big cameras into the room. So Stephen is down there talking to some politician who apparently isn't even that interesting, with an iPhone camera, whereas I'm at the north getting this crazy footage on the less good camera, whilst the actual camera guy is down there just having his skills wasted in the Knesset building. So fuck. That's really annoying. Because I don't know. I don't know if the flashes were captured on the other handheld camera, because I never looked back at the footage. I don't know. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. Did you do street interviews? Oh yeah. Yeah, I did. I interviewed protesters in Tel Aviv. I interviewed people in the West Bank. I interviewed people in Sderot. Quasi-interviewed a survivor from the Nova Festival. Kind of interviewed someone at Kfar Aza, someone who has like a bunch of people, who knows a bunch of people who are still hostages. I did some interviews around, interviewed a Haredi lady at the Western Wall. Yeah, I did a few. Did you meet Rami David and the hero? Oh, the guy who saved like 300 people in his car. Yeah, we met him. Yeah. What even day did I get to? This story was. Do you know whose idea it was to do this pose? It was his. It was Nabil Al-Kurd's idea to reenact the scene. Like I told you, these guys, they love being in front of cameras. They like people spreading their stories. Like, oh God, this fucking Sheikh Jarrah story is such a mindfuck. It's so stupid. Is that a pose? Yeah, he wanted to rearrange the thing. Yeah. It's ironic, because even though I think this guy is in the right and that he deserves to keep his house, all of it, not just the half of it that's gone off, that is detached from Jacob, but he's right for all the wrong reasons. Like, because this guy basically denies that there was ever any like Jewish neighborhoods around this area before 48. He just thinks it's not real. And then he thinks the documents that were produced by the Jewish organizations who had the Ottoman documents from the 1800s are just fake. He thought they were all fake documents, and that the courts got brainwashed into thinking they were real. And yeah, it's just fucking wild. But obviously he has to say that. He can't say the correct. Okay. Just for background, the story here is that in Sheikh Jarrah, which is in East Jerusalem, there's this house, or a number of houses, that are under a decades-long dispute. So what happened? Well, in the 1800s, late 1800s, a Sephardic community purchased 2 plots of land from the Ottoman Empire. One was called Shimon HaTzadik, and the other one was called Naharat Shimon. And they built a few like small Jewish neighborhoods. A lot of the area around here is just not built on, but they own some of the land. So it's like it's owned land, but it's a lot of just like olive trees and shit like that. So they have these little neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. And in the 48 war, Jordan, the Arab Legion, takes over this area. And the people who live in this area, the Jewish ones, are evacuated by the British Empire. They have to leave. So they leave and they go into Israel. They lose the land that they bought from the Ottomans, and then that's it. Meanwhile, a bunch of refugees from the 48 Israel borders end up in East Jerusalem or along the West Bank. Many of them in this area from Haifa and Jaffa. This guy, Nabil Al-Kurd, is from Haifa. So when this guy's 4 years old, he enters the West Bank from Haifa. So, when he's there, in 1955-56, UNRWA and Jordan have this land that they decide to dish out to some of the refugees in exchange for them getting rid of their refugee card. So they do it like a lottery system. They hand out this land through a lottery, and one of the houses ends up going to Nabil. So he loses his refugee status, but he gets his house. But then in the 6-Day War, Israel takes this part back. They occupy East Jerusalem and the West Bank. And after a couple of decades, nothing happens. But then eventually, towards the 80s and then into the early 2000s, these Jewish organizations start trying to reclaim the land that they lost in the 48 War, like including this area. And an Israeli law gets passed that basically gives them the right to do that, to reclaim lost property from the 48 War. So they tried to reclaim this area because it turns out that Nabil al-Kurd had built an extra part of his house, like an extension on his house, in land which was supposedly owned by this Jewish organization. So the Israeli government seals that part of the house. And then in the 2000s, that's when the Sephardic Jewish community starts moving people in. And one of the guys that gets moved in is eventually a guy called Jacob or Yaakov. So legally, Yaakov owns a chunk of this house, like attached to Nabil's house in the same area. And no, he doesn't own it, but he's a legal tenant. The organization owns it. So, and for people like Nabil, they try to do a law that's like, they don't really want people to get evicted that easily. So what they do is they say that you can stay here in these houses that were given to you by the Jordanians and UNRWA in 55, that a lot of them built on empty land. They can stay there, but they have to pay what's called a protected tenancy rent. So they have to pay rent to the owners. But the al-Kurd family refuses, and then suddenly a bunch of other families in this area in Sheikh Jarrah refuse as well, and there are evictions, like a few people get evicted. But then there are other legal disputes about whether or not you have the right to get evicted, even though you don't own the land, so some people get to move back to their homes. So you get the situation now where, well, in 2014, I think, the al-Kurd family, this is Mona al-Kurd, which I think is Nabil's daughter or granddaughter, I can't remember. But yeah, she's basically shouting at Yaakov and saying, "You're stealing my house." And Yaakov says, "If I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it. What's the problem?" Right? So that goes viral because it's an insane clip.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi.
It's his daughter. Oh yeah, because she's the twin of Muhammad al-Kurd, yeah, the poet.
Yaakov, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But you...
Because Yaakov's argument here is that he's a tenant. He doesn't own the house. So the house was sealed by the Israeli government. And if Yaakov leaves, the organization is just going to want another settler to go in. So yeah.
It's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
Do you think those evictions are just? Absolutely not. No. For probably a very different reason that you do, don't Ian? Because the reason Nabil has to believe like Nabil's argument is that the documents are fake, that there were no Jews living in the Sheikh Jarrah area, that these places, Shimon Hatzadik and Naharat Shimon, were just like this is just empty land that no one owned. They have to believe that because they can't actually cede the idea that the correct argument is that the people who owned those bits of property and those bits of land were forced out during a war, but they ended up in Israel where they could get citizenship and where the Israeli government was dishing out Arab land all over the place and Arab houses and confiscating Arab properties. So that's it. The refugee crisis was solved. They moved over to a different country and they became citizens there. That's it. I don't believe in going to places 20 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 years later and evicting people to uphold the sanctity of Ottoman land documents. And the fact is that no one believes that because these people don't believe it. Nabil doesn't seem to believe that because it would mean Jewish people get to come into East Jerusalem and reclaim bits of property and bits of land that they used to own before 48. And obviously Israelis don't like it because it would mean like millions of Palestinians coming back to live in Israel. So yeah. Couldn't al-Kurd just accept Israeli citizenship? No. The owners want Jews to live there, not Israeli citizens. They want Jews to live there. Also, it's not easy to become an Israeli citizen if you live in East Jerusalem. What if the land was empty and not inhabited? It was still owned. It was owned. It was not, it was empty, but it was owned. Like if you buy land, you own the land, right? You don't need to build on it to keep your ownership. So that's the correct argument, but no one wants to cede that argument because people on the right of the Israeli side, they want Jewish people to live in these areas to change the demographics of East Jerusalem. And Arabs obviously want to uphold Ottoman documents because it's right of return, like the classic Palestinian right of return. So, that's basically why. Anyway. Isn't paying rent a fair solution? No.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else steals it.
Yeah. So then Jacob gives an interview to Vice. And this is his explanation. Where is it? What's his actual name? Yaakov. I remember his last name. Is it not Fauci? So would you say that Israeli law is contradictory to favor Jews to evict Arabs, but not the other way around? Yeah. Yeah. It's a stupid law. And again, no one actually cares about Ottoman land documents. No one cares. No one. They only care if it suits their political goal. And in this case, the political goal is to move Jewish people into areas in East Jerusalem to strengthen their presence there so that they have a claim to it in a peace deal. How was the food? The food was amazing. Food here is not great. Yeah. Best meal, the mixed grill in the West Bank, and probably also the chicken shish in northern Israel. Most annoying commonplace behavior in Israel. The drivers are pretty insane. I don't think anyone was like particularly annoying. Yeah, the Arab drivers are very, they use their horns a lot. Why didn't you stream for there? Because the Wi-Fi was shit. The internet was really, really shit in all the places we stayed. I wouldn't have been able to stream if I wanted to. And we just didn't have any time. We had no time. Any shawarma? Yeah, of course I had shawarma, yeah. A couple of times. Did you go to Abu Ghosh? We might have. I don't remember. What was the most unexpected thing culturally? That's a good question. I think Palestinians in the West Bank are a lot more social than I expected them to be. Like to the point where people will just come up to you and wave at you and like smile and shake your hand and shit like that. And just like, even if they don't speak even if you can't speak their language or just like, yeah. Like when you go there, it feels like everyone knows each other, like the way that they come and talk to you, but you don't actually know who they are. Like the way that they react to you, a lot of them, is like you've just bumped into a friend and you're happy to see them. Yeah. Like I said, good people on both sides. Were people generally friendly and curious? Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah. As long as you're not visibly Jewish, of course. Yep. And again, there's a difficult thing where people can be very interpersonally friendly, because settlers are like this as well. They're very friendly, they're very nice to you and all that. And they also insist that they have no problems with Arabs and all that, but politically they're just batshit. And the political actions that they support are really harmful. And that I would say that's true of, again, like you're walking around the West Bank, you know that you're in an area where the majority of people support Hamas, right? Like that's not, it doesn't matter how kind they are to you, like they support Hamas, they a lot of them. So yeah, they're both true at the same time. And they would obviously be less kind to you if you had a Star of David on your necklace, right? Or anything like that. Did anyone there know you from your channel? A couple of Jewish kids in the Jewish Quarter knew who I was, yeah. And obviously a whole bunch of people from the Destiny meetup. Because I thought, like my plan at the Destiny meetup was to have a small group from my Discord to go and hang out in Jaffa. That was the plan. We were going to go to a bar in Jaffa, like 10 of us. But we were late because of the traffic and because of the long interviews. So people in my Discord are like, oh God, look at all the Destiny fans here, especially the girls are like, there's so many Destiny fans around us. And yeah, we get there. And then I was late for the thing that I was supposed to be going to with my friends anyway, because we had a bar booked. We had a table booked. So I tried to step away because I thought everyone would just go and follow Stephen, but then they ended up splitting off, and half of them started following me around and asking me questions and talking to me. So there was Stephen, like his nucleus moving away from us, and then I have my own nucleus forming around me, or I am the nucleus, I guess. So that was pretty wacky. That was really funny. And everyone's so short. I had so much high ground over them. I could see so much. 2-streamer solution. Yeah, there was definitely some partitioning going on. Yeah, and then we just eventually I had to find, and even when I found my group and we split off to go and walk down towards the car, people started following us anyway. Like the crowd just, people were like, "Oh, can I ask you a question?" Well, yeah, you have to walk with us while you ask it. Yeah. You saw me going away from the meeting with like 10 girls. I don't know if it was 10. But our meetup was like even split. It was like 50, it was like 5 girls, 5 guys. Yeah. No, I was not walking away with 10, like a fucking, like a harem. No, that didn't happen. Did you get the impression that Palestinians would be content with a 2-state solution? Some of them, so the leaders, yes. The average person on the street, no. There was one guy we met, and I was asking him, well, Stephen was asking him about the refugee situation and whether or not he still wanted, because he had a fairly good life where he was. Like he had his, like he ran a shop and he felt like, in his words, he was doing well for himself. But we were asked if he wanted to go back to Lod, where he was from, where his family were expelled. And he'd never been there before. He was born in the West Bank. But he said he would go like immediately. Like he wants to go back. And it's like the most important thing because that's where his family's from. That's their land. And I asked him, what if Israel said that you could go, but only you go? Like you go there and you go and live in Lod with a majority of Jews. Would you do that tomorrow? And he was like, yeah, I would go there and I'd live with them. And I was like, would you miss any of the people you know around here? And he was just like, yeah, but you know, is what it is. That was really fascinating to me. Like just how sacred like that right is to them. Are Israeli girls cute? Everyone in that region has like the most perfect cheekbones and everything. Yeah, like the guys, the girls, everyone there is just like straight, freakishly good looking. Yeah, not everyone, but like most of them. Yeah, disproportionately. Maybe I just say that as a Scottish person, but yeah, everyone's everyone's got their shit worked out over there. Oh, another thing I learned. Fuck me. Especially from talking to that volunteer who had been bombed as a child in northern Israel by southern Lebanon, right? Or the person who had lived in Kfar Aza and who knew the 64 people who had been murdered in that village and was doing the tours of the wreckage and showing everyone what had happened there. The fact that someone like that, at the end of the tour of Kfar Aza, where we saw all the destruction and the markings that were made by the IDF of like who died in each house and the photographs of the people who died, or to the point of like pictures of somewhat like everything was left as it was. The overturned bed that a Hamas guy had tipped over so he could hide behind it to shield himself as he was still fighting, because that battle lasted like 5 days, right? Or the different spots where people had been killed, all that kind of shit. But she said to us right at the end, pointing over at Gaza, as we can hear the IDF artillery firing over, she basically says, over there, like she said their well-being, their security and their prosperity is connected to ours. Like Israel cannot have a secure, prosperous existence if the people in Gaza don't either. That was what she said. And that whatever happens after the war with Hamas, that needs to be acknowledged. Like they can't just go back to status quo. They can't go back to occupation. They can't go back to living under Hamas. Like they need something so that Israelis can feel safe as well, and so that they can feel safe. So she was very clear about that, like very like humanist about it. Even though she said that she's kind of ditched her dreams of like, oh, one day we'll go to Gaza as like equals and we'll go and meet the locals and have coffee with them. She's done with that. She doesn't want to know anyone in Gaza ever again. Like, because she's seen the videos of Gazan civilians supporting the attacks and cheering as Shani's body was taken through. Yeah, so she's like, even that though, even the fact that she wants nothing to do with the people who live there anymore, she still wants like what's best for them as well. And it made me realize that hearing people, or on the other end, hearing Palestinians who had lost their, the one Palestinian family, Abu Akhder, that family, who had lost their son to a settler attack where 3 settlers kidnapped him, beat the shit out of him, and then poured kerosene down his throat and set him on fire. Even that family saying that they don't want anyone to take revenge. They were adamant that no one should be taking revenge against the Israelis for what happened to them. Like, after hearing on both ends those kinds of stories and those kinds of reactions, it's to think that people can go through all that pain and suffering and loss and humiliation and all this like lack of justice and all this shit. The fact that people can go through all that and still have an easier time acknowledging the humanity of the other side compared to a privileged like university student suburban in the United States or Europe is like, it's so insane to me. The fact that they can come out of all that with more sanity and like, and just like a more peaceful mind than people that we argue with online is just like, so to me, it's people who use suffering as an excuse for their hatred, especially when they're not actually suffering themselves. I think they're full of shit. They're just people who would be hateful regardless. Like I'm sorry. Just the fact is that there exist Israelis who have gone through more pain and have lost more people than there are like some Palestinians in the West Bank, right? Like that's just probability. So it's not like both sides are suffering equally or both sides are equally powerful. I don't think you would ever, I don't know how the fuck anyone would even suggest that. The point is that both sides have suffered a lot and they managed to come out of it less hateful than people who haven't felt any of it. Yeah. But I see why. Like, you see why people in the West Bank are more supportive of Hamas potentially than people in Gaza, or why people, why like the violent rhetoric on the death to Israel and all that shit is actually like seems to come. At least I heard it. Like I heard more maximalism in university campuses than I heard being in the West Bank. Again, I'm sure it's not completely accurate representation, but the fact that it exists like that is. I think it's because the people who really, really support the violence and the maximalism, it's partly because it's easier to support it when you don't face the consequences of it. People in the West Bank understand what a third intifada would mean for them. They understand that it would hurt them. It's also interesting to see that things that supposedly help security have really horrible long-term consequences for security, because the amount of people I spoke to from around the Gaza area, from whether it's Sderot or from the kibbutzim, talking about how they used to, the older people, talking about how they used to go to Gaza like all the time. They would go to the beaches and they would go and get their cars fixed by Palestinian mechanics, and they would even establish like friendships, like that, especially before First Intifada, if you're talking the much older ones. But they would talk about this. And then obviously you have the Intifada, and then you have the wall and the blockade and everything else with Hamas coming to power. And it's really unfortunate that things that have their security reasons, like the Gaza blockade or like even the separation barrier in the West Bank, right? Because the reason they put that up was because of the Second Intifada. They said people are coming through all the time and they're managing to set off suicide bombs in Israel proper, like we need a wall. So they put up the wall. But then the problem is that once the wall's up, like the amount of contact between one side and the other just completely plummets. And then you have new generations that are growing up in that. And a generation of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank are no longer growing up where they get the opportunity to meet like Israeli children, or where they get the opportunity to meet Israelis in their shops or in their beaches or in their communities. So they don't see that anymore. And then the point they're at finally is that the only people they actually interact with from Israel are the IDF. And if you're in Gaza, the only Israelis you interact with are border troops and people flying above you dropping bombs. So these things that are like, they might have their security reasons to begin with, end up building up to be like a massive security compromise, because it becomes so much harder for one side to humanize the other one. So, yeah. It's also really funny that the people here always say phalangist, but again, like I said, Israelis and Palestinians are both equally excited to learn when I'm Lebanese. Like, it was really funny. Like, if I'm talking to the, like, if I was in the West Bank, the guy who introduced me to people would be like, Lubnani and shit like that. And they're really happy to hear, even though they know my name is a Christian name. Like most like Lebanese people who have my name are like Christians, not Muslims. So they know that I'm like Maronite, not Muslim. But still, they're just like, they're really happy to hear that there's a Lebanese person there. The only national group that they care about are Jews, like running into Jews. They don't give a fuck about running into Lebanese Christians. The same with Israelis. Which is also ironic, because Israelis, if they realize I'm Maronite, they think Lebanese Maronites are like friends of Israel. But again, even that's not really true. That's really like, if you look at the polling, Lebanese Christians hate Jews just as much as Lebanese Muslims do. They really don't like Israel at all, especially after the 06 war. But you know, it just goes to show you again that people don't really have the same political consciousness as these like retards like the Fidel Castro in chat, right?